On the 14th of April 1935, the Black Sunday dust storm swept across the Great Plains during the Dust Bowl era.
Some photographs hold secrets of history's most powerful moments, images so rare and profound that they unveil stories left untold in the pages of history books. Imagine a picture that could make hardened soldiers emotional to images of people who were resilient in the face of death. These images reveal untold stories of courage, devastation, and humanity's darkest chapters. Join us as we uncover rare, shocking, and heartbreaking historical photos you won't find in history books. Our first stop on this visual journey is a powerful snapshot that pulls us into a gripping moment where courage meets tragedy in a Finnish forest. Russian spy laughing through his execution in Finland. This emotive photograph captures the defiant last moments of an unidentified Soviet intelligence officer in Rukajärvi, East Karelia. The image shows him laughing in the face of death, displaying remarkable courage, or perhaps madness, before his Finnish executioners. The photograph remained hidden from public view for decades. The Finnish Defense Forces kept such images classified, wary of their potential use as propaganda tools by pro-Soviet sympathizers within Finnish society. The Ministry of Defense of Finland declassified this powerful image in 2006, along with its simple yet chilling description: unknown Soviet intelligence officer before being shot, Finland, 1942. While one photograph captures the defiance of a spy at the edge of death, the next reveals the quiet dignity of a child burdened by unimaginable loss. A Japanese boy waiting in line at the crematorium. History captures its darkest moments in the most nostalgic ways. In August 1945, U.S. forces dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki, Japan, unleashing unprecedented devastation. Among the ruins, photographer Joe O'Donnell captured an image that would pierce hearts for generations. A young Japanese boy, standing straight-backed at a crematorium. The boy's composure masks an unthinkable burden. Strapped to his back is his dead baby brother, wrapped carefully for his final journey. The child's bare feet press against the dirt as he waits his turn at the cremation pit, his face a mask of dignity beyond his years. While the Japanese boy's silent agony captured the devastation of one tragedy, another distressing story was emerging from the prison camps in Singapore. Emaciated British soldiers. This haunting photograph captures 5 skeletal figures perched on ambulance steps in Singapore in 1945. These men are British soldiers who survived Japanese prison camps. They tell a devastating story through their gaunt faces and protruding bones. Among them sits Sergeant Jack King R.M., his trembling hands clutching a Daily Express newspaper dated September 5, 1945. The cruel irony lies in its headline about Hiroshima's atomic aftermath, while these men embody a different kind of warfare's brutality. Standing beside him, Private Tom Wardrope's distinctive chest tattoo stretches across skin pulled tight over visible ribs, a stark reminder of years of starvation and abuse in Sumatra's prison camps. His once strong soldier's frame has been reduced to a shadow of its former self. The black blizzard of the Dust Bowl. From the brutality of war prisons to the merciless force of nature, history's tragedies come in many forms. The wistful photograph captures nature's raw fury, a towering wall of black dust, 300 feet high, rolling across the Texas plains like a massive tsunami of Earth. This terrifying phenomenon, known as Black Sunday, struck on April 14, 1935, marking one of America's most catastrophic environmental disasters. As the storm approached, it transformed day into night. Winds howled at 60 miles per hour, carrying an estimated 300,000 tons of precious topsoil, darkening skies from Oklahoma to Texas. Residents of Beaver, Boise City, and Amarillo found themselves engulfed in complete darkness, unable to see mere feet in front of them. The human toll proved devastating. Families huddled in their homes, pressing damp cloths against windows and door frames, desperately trying to keep the suffocating dust at bay. Respiratory illnesses became rampant, livestock perished, and crops withered. One unfortunate man permanently lost his sight to the abrasive particles. As the Dust Bowl storm settled, another natural disaster was about to shake the foundations of history, literally. The aftermath of the San Francisco earthquake. On April 18, 1906, at 5:12 a.m., San Francisco experienced a devastating earthquake measuring approximately 7.9 on the Richter scale. This violent event not only altered the city's landscape, but also set off a series of fires that would burn for 3 days, leaving behind a scene of utter destruction. This picture shows how Market Street, the city's main road, turned into a desolate area filled with twisted metal and shattered dreams. The impact on human life was immense, as over 3,000 people lost their lives. 225,000 residents were left without homes, 28,000 buildings were destroyed, and property damage amounted to $524 million, equivalent to $15 billion today. Many of these rare photographs were taken by amateur photographers who risked their lives to capture the disaster. The USS Maine explosion. As San Francisco struggled to rise from its ashes, another explosion across the seas would ignite a different kind of fire, one of war and controversy. The haunting photograph of the USS Maine's twisted wreckage in Havana Harbor is a chilling reminder of one of history's most controversial maritime disasters. On that fateful evening of February 15, 1898, a catastrophic explosion ripped through the battleship's hull, claiming the lives of 266 American sailors and officers. While the exact cause remains mysterious, this devastating incident became a pivotal moment in American history. Yellow journalism seized upon the tragedy, with newspapers running sensational headlines like, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." This powerful image of the destroyed vessel fueled public outrage and anti-Spanish sentiment across the United States. The destruction of the USS Maine proved to be the final spark in already strained U.S.-Spanish relations. Despite lacking concrete evidence of Spanish involvement, the incident accelerated the path to war. By April 25, 1898, the United States had officially declared war on Spain, launching the Spanish-American War that would reshape the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. While the USS Maine's explosion shook America across the Atlantic, a fateful drive through Sarajevo would shape the future of the entire world. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This touching photograph captures Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie in their car, just moments before the shots that changed history. The royal couple sits in their open-top automobile, unaware of the impending tragedy that would spark a global conflict. The streets of Sarajevo bustled with onlookers that fateful June morning. Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist, waited in the crowd. His actions would set off a chain reaction of alliances and declarations that plunged Europe into World War I. Minutes later, Princip's bullets would find their targets, killing both the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne and his beloved wife. Within weeks of their deaths, the world's major powers mobilized their armies, drawing millions into a conflict that would reshape the global landscape. The falling man. One photograph, one moment in time, this haunting image became the face of one of history's darkest days. At 9:41 a.m. on September 11, 2001, Richard Drew's camera captured a man plummeting headfirst from the World Trade Center's North Tower, a split second that would become an enduring symbol of that tragic day. The identity of the man remains uncertain, though investigations suggest he might have been Jonathan Briley, a 43-year-old audio technician. The photograph sparked intense debate about the ethics of publishing such intimate moments of human tragedy. The man's graceful descent, arms at his sides, left leg bent at the knee, created an almost serene image amid chaos. This stark contrast made the photograph particularly affecting, leading many newspapers to pull it from circulation after initial publication. This image represents the estimated 200 people who chose to jump rather than face the flames and smoke. Chinese guerrilla fighter. This haunting photograph captures Chinese resistance fighter Cheng Benhua's final moments in 1938. The image shows her with an enigmatic smile, facing death with remarkable composure mere seconds before her execution by Japanese forces. The photograph gained prominence as a symbol of Chinese resilience during the Second Sino-Japanese War. While one image captures the defiant courage of an individual facing death, another reveals the overwhelming struggle of humanity against a silent killer. The influenza pandemic. What happens when humanity is brought to its knees by an invisible enemy? This image tells the story of the Spanish flu's relentless toll. This picture captures the stark reality of the 1918 influenza pandemic, as rows of hospital beds stretch endlessly through a makeshift ward, each occupied by a patient fighting for survival. The image, taken at an emergency hospital in Camp Funston, Kansas, reveals the overwhelming scale of what became known as the Spanish flu. Streets filled with citizens wearing cloth masks became a common sight across American cities. These masks, often made from gauze and cheesecloth, served as a desperate attempt to ward off the deadly virus. The pandemic claimed an estimated 50 million lives worldwide, with about 675,000 deaths in the United States alone. Hospital photographs reveal exhausted nurses working around the clock, their faces covered in masks as they tended to endless waves of patients. The Hiroshima shadows. From the silent suffering in overcrowded hospitals to the haunting imprints left by one of history's deadliest weapons, humanity's fragility knows no bounds. The imprints left behind on the streets of Hiroshima tell a scary story of August 6, 1945. When the atomic bomb detonated, the intense heat and radiation created permanent shadows with human silhouettes burned into stone steps, walls, and pavements. These eerie outlines mark the exact spots where people stood at the moment of impact, their bodies vaporized in temperatures reaching 7,000 degrees Celsius. This particular image shows the nuclear shadow of a person sitting on the steps of the Sumitomo Bank. The concrete around the figure darkened while the area blocked by their body remained lighter, creating a permanent reminder of their final moments. The liberation of Auschwitz. As Hiroshima's shadows etched a moment of devastation into stone, another tragedy left haunting images that bore witness to unspeakable human suffering. On January 27, 1945, Soviet forces captured emotive photographs that serve as silent witnesses to one of humanity's darkest chapters. Behind the barbed wire fences of Auschwitz, Red Army soldiers discovered 7,000 emaciated survivors, living skeletons who had endured unimaginable horrors. This particular striking photograph shows children in striped uniforms rolling up their sleeves to display their tattooed identification numbers. These photographs shocked the world's conscience and became crucial evidence during the Nuremberg trials. Married couple reunited. The horrors of Auschwitz came to an end in 1945, but for one couple, the war left behind a separation so profound it spanned over half a century. This heart-wrenching short clip captures the moment two souls, once bound by marriage vows, reunited after an unimaginable 54-year separation caused by World War II. The black and white image was their wedding picture, and here is an elderly woman with a tearful face as she confronts a bittersweet reality. Her husband, now a stranger, stands before her with a different life entirely. She had preserved their love in amber, refusing to remarry as decades passed, holding on to hope that war's cruel winds would eventually blow him back to her. Time marched relentlessly forward as she waited, her heart frozen in 1939. The man's path diverged dramatically. In the chaos of war's aftermath, believing his first wife was lost, he rebuilt his life brick by brick with a new marriage, children, and grandchildren. His family tree had grown strong and wide while his first wife remained single. The Selma to Montgomery March. From love torn apart by war to a movement nearly shattered by violence, history's echoes grow louder on Selma's bridge. The grainy black and white photographs from March 7, 1965 speak of American injustice. Peaceful civil rights demonstrators, armed only with their courage and conviction, faced a wall of state troopers on Selma's Edmund Pettus Bridge. The air was thick with tension, and the marchers' determination to secure voting rights for African Americans was met with brutal force. State troopers, mounted police, and armed citizens unleashed a reign of terror. Tear gas clouded the air as batons swung indiscriminately at men, women, and children. The touching image of activist Amelia Boynton Robinson, beaten unconscious and left lying on the bridge, became a powerful symbol of the day's violence. While Selma's marchers fought against oppression on land, another tragedy unfolded at sea, leaving behind a haunting photograph. The last photograph of the Titanic crew. They stood proudly before the unsinkable ship, unaware it would soon be their tomb. This is the Titanic crew's haunting last photo. This image shows their faces bright with anticipation, unaware of the tragic fate awaiting them. The photograph was taken by Irish Jesuit Francis Brown and is the last visual monument of many souls who would never return from their maiden voyage. In this remarkable photograph, we see the crew members impeccably dressed in their pristine uniforms, standing proudly before the world's most luxurious ship. Their expressions reflect the collective pride of being part of such a groundbreaking maritime achievement of the unsinkable Titanic. While the Titanic's crew faced their tragic end on icy waters, another image reveals the emotional wreckage left on land by war's devastating truths. German soldiers in tears. Tears replace uniforms as these German soldiers face the haunting reality of their complicity in history's darkest crimes. This haunting photograph captures the raw human emotion of war's aftermath, stripping away the uniforms and military ranks to reveal its devastating reality. German soldiers, once part of Hitler's Wehrmacht, sit in rows, their faces twisted in anguish, hands covering their eyes, shoulders trembling with sobs. In 1945, these men were forced to watch documentary footage of the concentration camps, confronting the horrific truth of the Holocaust their regime had perpetrated. For many, this was their first exposure to the systematic brutality carried out in camps like Auschwitz, Dachau, and Bergen-Belsen. Some soldiers claimed ignorance of the atrocities, while others had actively participated. The Allied forces' decision to show them this footage aimed to shatter any remaining illusions about the nature of the regime they had served. Through this photograph, we witness the psychological impact of forced acknowledgement, the precise moment when these men had to face their complicity in one of history's darkest chapters. Their tears speak volumes about the weight of collective guilt and the crushing realization of their role in unspeakable human suffering. The tears of these soldiers spoke of guilt, but the next photograph speaks of silence in the face of a child's despair. The starving child and the vulture. This is the image that shook the world's conscience as it captures a skeletal Sudanese child collapsed on the ground, with a vulture patiently stalking nearby. Photographer Kevin Carter snapped this heart-wrenching photo during Sudan's devastating famine, earning him the Pulitzer Prize in 1994. The photograph sparked intense debate about the ethics of photojournalism. Critics questioned Carter's decision to photograph rather than help the child. The image raised profound questions. Should photographers intervene in the suffering they document? Where does their responsibility as journalists end and their duty as human beings begin? Carter revealed he waited 20 minutes hoping the vulture would spread its wings for a more dramatic shot. The child's fate remained unknown. 3 months after winning the Pulitzer, haunted by the horrors he'd witnessed throughout his career, Carter took his own life at age 33. Some speculate that Carter's suicide was caused by the fame and guilt he felt over the photograph. While one photograph captures a single life teetering on the edge of despair, the next reveals a mother's grief multiplied sevenfold by war. A Soviet woman who lost 7 sons during World War II. 7 sons, 7 lives lost. This is the story of a mother's unimaginable sacrifice during World War II, in a heartbreaking photograph that captures the devastating impact of World War II on families. Anastasia Alexeyevna stands alone in her simple home, surrounded by pictures of her 7 deceased sons. Each face on the wall represents a story of sacrifice, a young life cut short by the ruthless machinery of war. The image shows her weathered face, marked by lines of unimaginable sorrow, as she looks at the camera with eyes that have shed more tears than most can endure. Her sons, all volunteers for the Red Army, fell one by one between 1941 and 1945, fighting to protect their homeland from Nazi invasion. As we leave behind the grief of one mother's sacrifice, the next story introduces a seemingly bizarre parenting practice in Moscow's harsh winters. Babies left to sleep outside Moscow. In the heart of Moscow's bitter winter of 1958, a peculiar sight caught the attention of Western photographers. Rows of baby carriages lined up outside apartment buildings, each containing a sleeping infant bundled against the cold. This wasn't negligence or abandonment. It was a deliberate practice deeply rooted in Soviet child-rearing philosophy. Soviet parents believed in zakalivani, the process of hardening children against illness through exposure to extreme temperatures. Babies as young as 2 weeks old would nap outdoors in temperatures as low as -10 degrees Celsius, wrapped in thick blankets and sheepskin bags. This practice wasn't limited to daylight hours. Parents would place their infants on apartment balconies or in courtyards for their daily naps, convinced that the crisp winter air would strengthen their immune systems and build resilience. Medical professionals of the era supported this approach, claiming that children who slept outdoors developed stronger constitutions and fell ill less frequently than their indoor sleeping counterparts. Istvan Reiner. While Moscow's babies were prepared for survival, Istvan Reiner's story reveals a tragic loss of innocence that no preparation could prevent. This studio portrait captures 4-year-old Istvan Reiner's innocent smile, his bright eyes gleaming with childlike joy. The photograph, taken between 1943 and 1944, was one of the last records of his existence before his life was cut tragically short at Auschwitz concentration camp. The image shows young Istvan dressed smartly in what appears to be his best clothes, his hair neatly combed, unaware of the dark fate that awaited him. His genuine expression of happiness, frozen in time, is a stark reminder of the estimated 1.5 million children who perished during the Holocaust. This photograph transcends the profound human cost of hatred and prejudice. Istvan's smiling face embodies the innocence and potential stolen from countless young lives during one of humanity's darkest chapters. From the tragedy of a young boy's stolen future, we move to the harrowing story of a girl who bore the weight of survival. An emaciated 18-year-old Russian girl. Her skeletal frame tells a story that words cannot. This photograph reveals the haunting proof of Dachau's horrors. This emotive photograph captures a moment of raw human suffering as an 18-year-old Russian girl, her skeletal frame bearing witness to the horrors of the Dachau concentration camp. Her eyes, sunken yet piercing, stare directly into the camera lens during the camp's liberation in 1945. The image is a reminder of the estimated 41,500 prisoners murdered at Dachau between 1933 and 1945. American forces who liberated Dachau found prisoners in similar states of severe malnutrition, many too weak to stand. The identity of this young survivor remains unknown, with her individual story lost to history. While the young girl's eyes reflected unimaginable suffering, another photograph reveals the courage of a soldier in the face of certain death. Sergeant Leonard George. The haunting photograph of Leonard Siflit's final moments is a piece of evidence of the brutal reality of World War II. The Australian Special Forces commando kneels in the sand, blindfolded, his face displaying remarkable composure despite knowing his fate. A Japanese officer looms behind him, sword raised high, ready to deliver the fatal blow. Siflit's story began in Papua New Guinea, where he led a small reconnaissance team gathering intelligence on Japanese movements. His mission took a tragic turn when local tribesmen captured him and his 2 Ambonese companions, Patawal and Riharan. The group was handed to Japanese forces and subjected to weeks of relentless interrogation and torture. A Japanese officer took this photograph as a trophy, but it was later discovered by American troops. The image sparked outrage when published in Life magazine, crystallizing the harsh realities of Japanese military conduct during the war. The photograph's raw intensity struck a chord with the American public, strengthening their resolve in the Pacific Campaign. The execution took place on Etape Beach on October 24, 1943. Siflit's last recorded words reflected his unwavering spirit. "Tell my people, I died like a soldier." Siflit's final moments echo the unrelenting cruelty of war. But the next photograph captures a death so immediate and shocking, it shifts the course of history. The execution of Nguyen Van Lim. This single photograph changed the course of public opinion about the Vietnam War. On a street in Saigon, Associated Press photographer Eddie Adams captured the precise moment when South Vietnamese National Police Chief Nguyen Ngoc Loan raised his .38 caliber pistol to the head of a Viet Cong prisoner. The image shows the raw brutality of war in stark detail. The prisoner's grimace, the officer's determined stance, and the split second before death. What many didn't know was that the prisoner, Nguyen Van Lem, had allegedly led a death squad targeting South Vietnamese police officers and their families. Adams' photograph won the 1969 Pulitzer Prize for spot news photography. The image appeared on front pages worldwide, crystallizing anti-war sentiment and fueling protests across America. The photo's impact haunted both Adams and General Loan for decades after. Adams later expressed regret about the photo's effect on Loan's reputation, stating, "The general killed the Viet Cong, I killed the general with my camera." A soldier's face after 4 years of World War. As Nguyen Van Lem's final moments were immortalized in a single photograph, this image shows how war engraved its toll on one man over time. This transformation, captured in 2 photographs at the Andrei Poznev Museum, tells a story words cannot fully express. Artist Eugen Stepanovich Kobitev's portraits, taken in 1941 and 1945, reveal the devastating toll of war on the human spirit. The first image shows a fresh-faced young artist, his eyes bright with hope and creativity. His gaze meets the camera with direct, unwavering confidence. The parallel photo, taken after 4 years on the Eastern Front, displays an almost unrecognizable man. Deep lines carve through his face like battle trenches. His hollow eyes seem to pierce through reality itself, bearing witness to unspeakable horrors. Born in a small Altai village in 1910, Kobytev had pursued a peaceful life as a rural teacher in Krasnoyarsk before Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union shattered his artistic dreams. The museum's poignant caption note reads, "The first picture looks at you, the second one looks through you." From the deeply personal toll on one man to a harrowing reminder of love stolen en masse, the next photograph reveals an unspeakable atrocity: wedding rings from the Holocaust. This image captures thousands of wedding rings stripped from Holocaust victims at the Buchenwald concentration camp in Weimar, Germany, in 1945. Each ring represents not just a life stolen, but a shattered promise, a broken family, and a love story cut tragically short. US troops made the grim discovery near the camp: mountains of personal belongings systematically collected by Nazi forces. Beyond the wedding bands lay watches, precious stones, eyeglasses, and even gold dental fillings, all meticulously sorted and stored. While the wedding rings bore silent testimony to unimaginable loss, the next image shows a flicker of shared humanity amidst the chaos. A US Marine gives a cigarette to a Japanese soldier buried in the sand. In one of the bloodiest battles of World War II, a powerful moment of compassion was captured by a photographer. On March 16, 1945, a Japanese soldier who had endured 36 exhausting hours buried in a shell hole with only a grenade for company came face to face with US Marines. The black volcanic sand of Iwo Jima had become his temporary tomb, a desperate last stand as American forces swept through the island. The Marines, discovering his presence, skillfully disarmed him by knocking the grenade from his reach. Despite their initial caution, fearing booby traps,
a booby trap is meant to turn the safe into the unsafe.
They approached the buried soldier. What happened next transcended the brutality of war. The Japanese soldier, exhausted and defeated, made an unexpected request: a cigarette. The simple gesture captured in this photograph speaks volumes about human connection, even in warfare's darkest moments. The US Marine, likely hours earlier engaged in combat against this same enemy, now shared a moment of peace through a shared cigarette. Now to the subscriber's pick. Imagine a lone stairway, the perfect setting for a crime or a dramatic twist. On April 3rd, 1950, a would-be robber tried to snatch a lady's handbag, only to be stopped in his tracks. But here's the shock. From the picture, it looks like it was a bullet that stopped the robber, but it wasn't a bullet that disabled him, but a pistol shot of colored lye. This groundbreaking, non-lethal weapon was sold in Germany, where civilians couldn't carry firearms. Could this rare and shocking historical photo be a glimpse into the ingenuity of the past that history books have overlooked? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. As one photograph highlighted a creative solution to crime, the next captures a harrowing moment where justice took on a bitterly ironic form. German SS guards exhausted. This evocative image captures German SS guards lying face down in an empty mass grave at Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in 1945. These guards, who had overseen countless atrocities, found themselves forced by British soldiers to rest in the same graves they had created for their victims. The British Liberation Forces discovered unimaginable horrors at Bergen-Belsen on April 15, 1945. Thousands of unburied bodies littered the grounds, disease ran rampant, and survivors were barely clinging to life. The British troops immediately ordered SS personnel to handle the corpses. The SS guards, exhausted from clearing the bodies of their victims, were made to experience a fraction of the degradation they had inflicted on others. The image captures a moment of poetic justice, their brief rest taken in the very graves they had intended for their victims. Bergen-Belsen's death toll reached approximately 50,000 people during its operation. The camp's liberation exposed the true scale of Nazi atrocities to the world. Surviving prisoners, emaciated and ill, watched as their former tormentors were forced to clean up evidence of mass murder under Allied supervision. Leparadich. While justice was served to the perpetrators of atrocities, this image reveals a heartbreaking act of bravery from a teenage resistance fighter. In this powerful photograph taken just before her execution, we see the determined expression of a 17-year-old partisan looking back at us from the past. Lepa Radic, a young Yugoslav resistance fighter, stands at the gallows with an unwavering spirit that would make her a symbol in history. This image was captured during a fierce battle with German forces near Bosanska Krupa in 1943. But Radic's story goes beyond just being about resistance. The Nazi officers, possibly moved by her youth, offered her a chance to live. All she had to do was betray her fellow fighters by revealing their names. Her response has resonated through generations. "I am not a traitor. Those whom I know will reveal themselves when they avenge my death." The black and white photograph immortalizes her final act of defiance as she faced her executioners. Refusing to wear a blindfold, Radic stood tall with her hands tied behind her back, exuding strength in her posture. A Japanese mother and child. From the gallows in Yugoslavia to the ruins of Hiroshima, history continues to reveal moments of profound human strength. In the haunting aftermath of humanity's most destructive weapon, a poignant scene unfolds in Hiroshima. A Japanese mother sits with her child, their traditional kimonos a stark contrast to the apocalyptic landscape surrounding them. The photograph, taken in December 1945, captures them perched among the skeletal remains of burnt trees and scattered rubble. The burnt trees stretch toward a sky that once rained nuclear fire, while mother and child remain seated in quiet dignity, embodying both the profound tragedy and the indomitable spirit of Hiroshima's survivors. Stjepan Filipovic's defiant last stand. As we leave behind the quiet resilience of Hiroshima, we now confront the defiant roar of resistance in Yugoslavia. The haunting image captures Yugoslav partisan fighter Stjepan Filipovic's final act of resistance on May 22, 1942. With a noose around his neck, he stands defiantly, arms raised in a powerful gesture of rebellion against his Nazi captors. The photograph immortalizes his last words, which echoed through the streets of Valjevo, Yugoslavia: "Death to fascism, freedom to the people." These words transformed into a rallying cry that ignited the spirits of resistance fighters across the region. The Serbian State Guard unit might have silenced Filipovic's voice that day, but his message lived on. His phrase became the heartbeat of the Yugoslav partisan movement, spreading through whispered greetings and written messages as SFSN resistance members would exchange these words like a secret handshake, one calling Smrt fascismu, while another answered Sloboda Narodu. The last photo of the Romanovs. From Filipovic's raised fists to the somber faces of the Romanovs, history continues to reveal stories of resilience and tragedy. These photographs capture the final moments of Russia's last imperial family, the Romanovs, taken in May 1918 during their captivity in Yekaterinburg. These black and white images reveal Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, dressed in simple clothing, their faces bearing the weight of their circumstances. The photograph's haunting quality lies not just in its composition, but in the knowledge of what followed. Within weeks of this image, the entire family would face execution by Bolshevik forces in the basement of Ipatiev house, marking the violent end of the 300-year Romanov dynasty. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.